Welcome back to All Things Soggy Buns, the podcast where we explore incredible BBQ juicy burgers, crispy fries, all the good stuff from Maryland's favorite food truck.
And catering service?
That's right, catering too.
Don't forget about catering.
So we've got this stack of articles and notes here all about making BBQ sauce from scratch, and I'm already intrigued. What's the mission for this deep dive?
Well, imagine this. You've just picked up your order from Soggy Buns, maybe some of their famous baby back ribs or a pile of their pulled pork.
Okay, I'm with you.
Now, picture slathering on a homemade BBQ sauce that you made
Oh my goodness.
that perfectly complements those smoky, savory flavors. That's what we're aiming for today.
I love it. Okay, so you found the recipe that's going to make this happen.
You bet I have. This recipe comes from a food blog. It's called Homemade BBQ Sauce, Simply Delicious by Toby Ryder.
Okay.
And it's got a stellar 4.7 two-star rating
Wow.
from 7 votes. So that's pretty impressive for an online recipe.
Yeah, those ratings are no joke. All right, so what makes this recipe so special?
Well, what grabbed my attention right away was the simplicity of the ingredients. It's all stuff you probably already have in your pantry. Ketchup, Worcestershire sauce, balsamic vinegar, brown sugar.
Hold on. Ketchup. Is that really the best base for BBQ sauce?
Actually, it's a brilliant choice. Ketchup already has that tangy, sweet, and thick base
Oh, yeah.
that we love in BBQ sauce.
Yeah.
So you're essentially building upon those existing flavors.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see why this recipe is so popular.
And the instructions are just as straightforward. You just combine everything in a saucepan
Easy.
and simmer for 5 to 7 minutes or until the sugar dissolves. Couldn't be easier.
So it's simple, uses common ingredients, but what about the flavor? Can a recipe this basic really compete with those gourmet bottles you find at specialty stores?
Absolutely. And here's the kicker. This recipe encourages you to experiment. It suggests swapping brown sugar for honey or maple syrup for a different kind of sweetness.
I'm a big fan of maple syrup. I wonder how that would taste with Soggy Buns' pulled chicken. Do you think the sweetness would clash with their signature smoky flavor?
That's a great question. And it really highlights what's so cool about this recipe.
Okay.
You're not just following instructions.
Right.
You're becoming a sauce scientist.
Okay.
Tweaking things to create your own perfect flavor profile.
That's awesome. I love that. So it's like a base recipe that you can customize to your liking.
Right.
What other kind of customizations does it suggest?
It actually goes a step further and encourages adding extra spices to create your own signature sauce. It's just things like onion powder, cayenne pepper, red pepper flakes, or even mustard.
Wait, mustard in BBQ sauce? Does it even work?
It can. It can add a really interesting tangy and savory depth.
Huh.
Think of the flavor you get from a good Carolina-style BBQ sauce. Mustard often plays a key role there.
I am learning so much about BBQ sauce on this deep dive. I think I need to place a Soggy Buns order. Do they deliver?
I believe they do. You can definitely check out their full menu and ordering options on their website, soggybuns.com.
Perfect. But before I get completely sidetracked by delicious food fantasies, let's get back to this recipe. I'm curious about the cooking process.
Oh.
Are there any tips or tricks to make sure the sauce turns out perfectly?
Absolutely. One thing that stood out to me was a tip about adjusting the vinegar to sugar ratio.
Oh.
Apparently, if your sauce ends up too tangy, you can balance it out by adding a bit more sugar.
That's a great tip.
Mm.
I've definitely tasted some store-bought sauces that were way too vinegary. It's nice to know you can control that when you're making it yourself.
Exactly. And speaking of control, there's another tip I wanted to mention. If you're planning on using this sauce on steak, they recommend grilling the steak for a minute per side
Okay.
before basting it and continuing to cook to your desired doneness.
Oh, that makes sense. Searing it first would lock in those juices and create a nice crust for the sauce to cling to. It's like the culinary equivalent of priming a canvas before you paint.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And speaking of grilling,
Ooh, hold on. Before we move on, I want to hear more about these serving suggestions. You mentioned steak, but what else does the blog post recommend?
well, it covers all the classics: chicken burgers, ribs, pulled pork, basically anything you typically associate with BBQ sauce. But it also gets a little adventurous, suggesting you try it on pizza chicken wings
What?
and even as a dipping sauce for French fries.
Wait, BBQ sauce on French fries. Now that's something I've got to try. That sounds crazy, but I'm kind of into it.
Right. It goes to show how versatile this sauce is. And it got me thinking, what if we use this recipe as a base for a dipping sauce specifically designed for Soggy Buns' sweet potato fries?
That's a brilliant idea. We could add a touch of chipotle powder for some smoky heat, maybe a hint of lime juice for brightness.
And a pinch of cinnamon to complement the sweetness of the sweet potato fries.
This is getting good.
Yeah.
Okay, let's hear what people are saying about this recipe. Did you find any interesting comments from folks who've actually tried it?
Oh, tons. One commenter, Ola, raved about the sweet and tangy flavor, saying it was way better than anything you could buy in a store.
That's high praise. Did anyone else mention anything about the flavor? I'm curious to know if the smokiness from the paprika comes through.
Another commenter mentioned how beautifully the sauce caramelized on the ribs they made.
Ooh, that sounds incredible.
Ah.
Imagine that caramelized goodness on Soggy Buns' baby back ribs. It's making my mouth water just thinking about it.
And to top it all off, one commenter said the sauce actually gets better the next day,
Oh, wow.
which is great for making a big batch ahead of time.
Perfect for meal prepping or, stocking up for your next Soggy Buns feast. All right, this recipe sounds like a winner. What else is there to know?
Well, not all of the comments were glowing. One person did mention that they found the sauce a bit too thin and vinegary.
Interesting. But remember the blog post had that tip about balancing out the vinegar with sugar?
Exactly. So even if someone has a specific preference, there's room to adjust. It really speaks to the adaptability of this recipe.
This whole deep dive is really making me appreciate the art of making BBQ sauce.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always loved a good BBQ sauce,
Mm.
but I never thought about the science behind it.
Yeah.
The balance of flavors, the cooking techniques. It's fascinating.
I agree. And it's something we often take for granted. We just grab a bottle from the store
Yeah.
without thinking about all the thought and effort that goes into creating those complex flavors.
Right. It also makes you realize that you don't have to be a master chef to make something delicious.
Well,
With a few simple ingredients and a bit of experimentation, anyone can create a sauce that rivals the best out there.
absolutely. And that brings us back to Soggy Buns.
Oh, yeah.
Their entire menu is built on the idea of taking classic comfort food and elevating it with high-quality ingredients and creative twists.
And now imagine pairing their already incredible food with your own custom-made BBQ sauce. It's like the ultimate culinary power move.
I'm picturing it now. A plate piled high with soggy bunses, pulled pork smoky and tender drizzled with a homemade BBQ sauce infused with maple syrup and a touch of chipotle. Stop. You're making me hungry. I'm seriously about to drop everything and head over to Soggy Buns right now.
Well, before you do, don't forget to check out their website, soggybuns.com.
Right.
They've got their full menu online ordering, and you can even find out if they deliver to your area.
You're right. I need to plan this strategically.
Okay.
I'm adding it to my to-do list right now. 1, get ingredients for Toby's BBQ sauce recipe. 2, place a Soggy Buns order. 3, prepare for BBQ bliss. Sounds like a perfect plan.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
I think the most important thing is to realize that making your own BBQ sauce is not only achievable,
Right.
it's actually incredibly rewarding.
It's empowering to know you can control the flavor and customize it to your liking.
Exactly. And beyond that, it's a fun and creative process. Don't be afraid to experiment with different ingredients and spices. You might just surprise yourself with what you come up with.
And who knows, you might even discover your new signature sauce, the perfect complement to your next Soggy Buns feast.
Yeah, I love that. It's like we've unlocked this secret door to a whole new world of BBQ possibilities.
That's a great way to put it. Like we've been handed this amazing toolbox,
Yeah,
and now we can go out and create our own BBQ masterpieces.
I love it. And the best part is it doesn't have to be complicated. This Toby Ryder recipe proves that you don't need a culinary degree or a pantry full of fancy ingredients
Right.
to make something truly delicious.
It's all about understanding the basic principles and then having the confidence to experiment and, put your own spin on things.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I've gone from BBQ sauce novice to BBQ sauce enthusiast in the span of, like 20 minutes.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. And I think that's the beauty of exploring food and cooking.
Yeah,
There's always something new to learn and discover,
yeah.
even with something as seemingly simple as BBQ sauce. And speaking of discovery, I have a feeling our listeners are going to want to try this recipe for themselves.
Yeah.
Where can they find it?
You can find Toby Ryder's blog post, Homemade BBQ Sauce Simply Delicious, with a quick online search. It's definitely worth checking out.
And of course, you can find all things delicious at Soggy Buns. Whether you're craving ribs, pulled pork chicken burgers, or even those tempting sweet potato fries.
Don't forget to visit their website, soggybuns.com, to explore their full menu and see if they deliver to your area.
Okay, before we sign off, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. We've talked about the versatility of this BBQ sauce, how it can be used on everything from chicken to pizza to French fries. But I think it goes beyond that.
Oh, what do you mean?
I think this recipe is like a metaphor for life. It's about starting with a solid foundation, embracing simplicity, and then having the courage to experiment and add your own unique flair.
I like that. It's a reminder that sometimes the most satisfying creations come from humble beginnings.
And that even something as seemingly ordinary as BBQ sauce can be a source of creativity and joy.
Well said.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into deliciousness.
See ya next time.
We'll see you next time for another episode of the All Things Soggy Buns podcast.